Hey guys, this is Locke. In this video, I'm going to talk about a specific build that I'm using for Homa and why I recommend this one for 1-star Homas compared to another build for Homas that's 4 or 5-star, or if you're trying to get her star up as soon as possible. For me, I'm working on other projects right now, so she is 1-star. I'm probably going to stay 1-star for a little bit, but anyway, let's go into it. So there's another video that I talked about Homa in general, where I'm talking about her skills and how they work, and it's more general video. So if you're looking for, if you should pull her or things like that, I would recommend looking at that video first, because that talks about that in more general. This is going to narrow down on a very specific build that I'm using, especially for her at 1-star. So let's get into it. Why am I using this build? So in the previous video, I talked about this skill and how the bird interacts with her and how much damage you can get out of the bird. And through the course of a game, that bird will be doing quite a bit of damage. Like right now, the bird does 20% of Homa's attack as damage, and most of the time you're able to get this bird to attack twice in a turn. So that's already 40% of damage. And if you're using this skill, that's also going to increase the damage by 1.5 times. So it goes from 40% to 60%, right? And it's quite significant over the course of a fight. 60% extra damage that happens passively while, while you're still doing everything else you're doing is a lot. It adds up to quite a bit. It's actually going to be a little bit less than 60% because this skill is not going to be active all the time. It has a cooldown of 3 and lasts for 2 turns. And the ally that the bird is on is also going to be not active all the time because, again, cooldown of 3 and it lasts for 2 turns. So with that in mind, if you look at the overall damage of the bird, right, and increasing that bird's damage. So right now, as I said, 60% of the turn. Let's just leave it at 60. Like it's going to be less than 60, but for simplicity's sake, let's say 60% of attack. So even if you try to put all the stuff that increases the out of character damage, like for example, if you're using the tower tarot and you're using this bow that increases the out of turn damage, I think you can increase it to like 40% at max star. Let's see, this is 20% here and then 20% from the tower, so 40%. So that would increase the damage from the bird from 60% to less than 90, because 90 would be 50%. Let's just say 90%. Right, so it increases from 60% to 90%, an extra 30%. I think it'd actually be 24 if it's 40%. Yeah, okay. So it increases from 60% to 84%, an increase of 24% in damage. That is not that crazy. Like it's, sure, it increases the bird's damage, and overall you'll get a lot more damage out of the bird over the course of the fight. But instead, just take a look at this build for a second. So I'm using the Mega Melee Crossbow. This is 5-star, but even at 1-star, you're still getting 32% extra damage at 1 range, right? And when it goes to 2 range, you're getting 24% of damage. It gets even better at 5-star because you're getting 32%, and at 2 range, you're getting 27%. And then look at this tarot. This is increasing the single target damage by 20%. So at 1 range and a 5-star bow, she's able to do 52% of extra damage, right? So her normal attack's 100%. It increases by 52%. So she does 152% of damage for 1 range. And then at 2 range, it goes to 47. So 100% to 147% damage. I feel like that's a lot more of an increase in damage than focusing on the bird, because the bird, even if I focus on increasing its damage, it's gonna only go up to 24% extra damage. This one goes up to, even at 2 range, 47% extra, and that's a lot. It's I feel like that makes me get so much more damage out of Homa than focusing on just the bird. You should note that 32% of damage is not going to increase the bird's damage because the bird goes off of Homa's attack. This doesn't increase Homa's attack by 32, it increases her damage. So it's different. But it is quite a significant increase in Homa's damage. When I've been playing with her, I've been kind of surprised, although not really surprised because I know she'll do a lot of damage with the setup, but she does quite a bit, you know. Like these are really, really strong modifiers on her. And the two skills that I use the most, which is hovering support, and then her normal attack. Usually that's one turn, so her normal attack is used quite a bit. And then the other skill that I use often is barrel attack, which is also single target. So barrel attack is 80% instead of 100%, but it's still quite a nice modifier. So what is 52% of 80? So 50% of 80 is 40% extra damage. So I'm getting 40% extra damage if it's 50, and then if it's, yeah, it's either 147 or 152. It's about an extra 40% damage from this 80% damage modifier. So I feel like, you know, overall that is better to focus on than the bird, because, you know, at 1 star the bird's damage is limited. So what if I'm able to get her to 4 star? Then that out of turn damage looks a lot more attractive, because at 4 star this bird does 40% of damage to start, right? And if you're getting 2 attacks in a turn, that's 80%. And then if you are using the damage modifier on the skill, it goes from 80% to 120% of attack. So 120% of attack, and then if you add another 40% on top of that, now that looks a lot more attractive, right? Because that is another 48% of attack, so it goes from 120 to 168. Okay, that's a lot more attractive. So if you're focused on getting Homa to star up as soon as possible, like maybe you pulled on the banner multiple times, or you're already farming shards for her and you're hoping to get there, it'll still take a few months, but you know, hoping to get there as soon as possible, then, you know, when you do get there, it might be worthwhile then to switch from this build to kind of one that's supporting the bird's damage, because at that point the bird will be doing a lot more damage, like basically at least double, right? Like just this thing here will go from 20% to 40%, so that's already doing, you know, double the damage already. So at that point, as I said, it might be worthwhile switching from, you know, using the mega melee crossbow and this one to that. I also found that, you know, I'm like, so in the build that I have, not really in the build, but like what I was doing tower 9-1 to 9-5, just using Homa and Auguste, and so I was really using her healing as well. And this tarot increases the single target heal that she does by 20% as well. So not only does it increase her damage, but it also increases her heal. It doesn't increase the damage of this skill. And I actually found that I wasn't using this skill, actually I never used this skill in 9-4 or 9-5, which were the two harder fights to do. This one, barrel attack, just does so much more that I found myself using this one more than that one. So barrel attack, not only does it decrease defense, it gives you blind. So blind has an 80% chance of enemies missing their single target attack. So it came clutch a lot of times, and especially in 9-4. In 9-4, enemies take 60% less damage, unless you have a DOT on them. And you know, with Homa and Auguste, I don't have any DOTs, so usually Auguste would be able to kill these things like really fast, but he was not able to. They were able to, you know, I had to focus on that one by one, and decreasing the defense by 60% helped a lot. And then on top of that, having blind on them so Auguste doesn't die to their attacks was also key. So this skill I used a lot. I did not really use the skill at all, although I could see, like, you know, I could see the need for it. Like, you know, if this wasn't the case, like if enemies were not taking 60% of damage, then the skill obviously would do a lot more damage, and I might be able to do significantly more damage, right? So if I was using the skill, then maybe this is not really what I want to use. Because this will not increase the damage of AoE skills, and this one counts as an AoE. So if I was using this skill a lot more than I am, maybe I might even switch this to Magician. You might be wondering why Magician, because Magician, like, you have to also realize that Magician has another effect. So if I read here, right, Magician increases the damage by 16%. So this is regardless of AoE or single target, it increases damage by 16%. So even her regular attacks will do 116% of attack, because that's the effect of Magician. But then Magician later on, like for AoE targets, you do even more. Fine, that's fair. So then if I am planning on using this skill a lot more for whatever the build that I'm using, which I don't see myself doing so much right now, but if I was, then I would probably switch this tarot to Magician to get the most damage out of this. By the way, with some testing, people have found that this skill does two attacks, right? Like it says they both, so grants disturbance to target an ally, and then they both deal 60% of physical damage. So from some testing, people have found that the second hit of this skill is based on the damage of whoever Baelor is circling. So the first hit is based on Homa's attack, so 60% of Homa's attack, 3,131, okay? But the second hit, if you have it on Auguste, if you have Baelor circling Auguste, it's based on Auguste's 3,488 attack. So, you know, it's good to keep in mind. So you can get potentially a lot of damage out of the skill, depending on who is circling, who Baelor is circling. But I think the more important, like the more useful thing from this skill is actually the disturbance, because it'll let you dodge the first turn of attack, you know, once per round for two rounds. So I feel like that is a lot more useful, in my opinion, than the damage. Like the damage is okay, but I feel like that's really interesting, right? And it's not only for like it's to the target. It grants disturbance to whoever I'm targeting, and then additionally to the ally that Baelor is assisting. So disturbance can be granted twice on the same turn to two allies. So I feel like that's really interesting, in my opinion, anyway. So I don't, like, I would still use the skill, like, although I haven't really used it in 9.4 or 9.5, I feel like I would keep this for when I need it. But if I find that I'm just never using it, I might switch it to this one for more healing, or switch it for this one to have her do even more damage. So that's another point that I wanted to say as well, because if I'm using this build where Homa is doing so much extra damage, it might even be worthwhile to, and if I find that I'm not using the skill, then I'm going to get even more damage using the Rampage Archer, because it's going to increase the attack by 15% and crit rate by 30% if she's attacking an enemy that's within one tile of her, right? So she's going to do even more damage for enemies that are just next to her. And with the special effect of this skill, after she attacks, she can still run away. So she doesn't have a lot of defenses except for when enemies are attacking from the side or from behind. Then they have a huge chance to miss. But you know, usually I don't really want her to stay up front. So because of that, I do want, after she attacks, to position her away and move her away. So you know, I feel like it works well. Like I feel like she can still do a lot of damage, but still stay out of danger. And when she gets to 3 stars, she also gets an increased 1 extra movement tile as well. So her movement goes from 3 to 4. And movement always is extra nice. Like it's really nice to have extra movement. So yeah, so you know, this is the build that I'm using, and this is the reason why I'm using it. One note I want to make of the scroll of Auguste that I'm using on her, I find that it really works well with her. Like in both 9.4 and 9.5, there was a time that I used it, but in general, I find that most of the time I use her with Auguste, right? I mean, they pair really well. And she has higher speed than Auguste, which works most of the time. Like most of the time, I want her to give hovering support to Auguste, and then I want Auguste to go, so that works well. But when it comes to using this skill, I was thinking about it, and sometimes, because they both go right after each other, after she goes and after Auguste goes, then enemies will go, and they might go out of, like, they might go somewhere else and attack whoever else I want, or they might all focus on Auguste and kill him, right? Like, I'm not able to get the skill off when I needed to. So what I did was I put the scroll of Auguste on her to give Auguste the extra speed boost. So Auguste will go before her for 2 turns, not all the time, but just 2 turns when I want to set this up. So then Auguste will go and attack and stand in the place that I want her to stand. Then I will use the skill to AoE right after. So I find that that whole thing, that sequence of events works better than if I have her go and then Auguste goes and attacks, and then enemies go and enemies might kill him, or they might move out of range to not be able to get this properly on the next turn. So I usually use the Scroll of Auguste to get this in the perfect position, but in 9.4 and 9.5 I didn't really get a chance to do that. But I used this instead to get Auguste out of the way, or or take a turn before anyone else. So I was able to do that. But yeah, I mean, I find that this works better. Before this, I had the Flying Blade Arm Guard on her to be able to trigger it to get more attacks out of the bird. But I find that this just worked better with how I'm playing here. So that's the reason why I switched it. So I think, I will show you 9.4 and 9.5. I don't want to show you all of them because I feel like the other 3 are not as interesting, but I did them as well, 9, 1, 2, and 3. But these 2 were, I think it's worthwhile to look at it. But before I do, I'm just going to show you Auguste's stats. So he has 3,488 attack, and I'm also going to show you the talents that I have. So this is the bonus talents that I have, and then we'll go and take a look at 9.4 and 9.5 just to see how these 2 played out. 9.4 was the more difficult one actually, because enemies just took a lot more reduced damage, so I had to really work on them one by one. 9.5 was a lot easier because there were barrels that I could take advantage of. But anyway, here we go. So I can't really just go in and attack everything. I had to do it one by one, and I find that Stinger to be the most dangerous of them all because he's a seeker type. So I had to take him out first, and then I used that skill to decrease that Stinger's defense, which helped me to 1-turn him with Auguste. And then I also used the old scroll on him as well, so I was able to move him out of the way before that cleric came and attacked. Okay, and then so here I'm using that invulnerable skill so that when enemies attack, he does some damage back. Usually it does a lot of damage, but because of the 60% reduced damage until you do DOT damage on them, it didn't really amount to much here. But anyway, so I had to, as I said, I had to focus on them one by one, and most of the time I did that by using Homa's barrel attack skill. But then here's a key turn where I used barrel attack on that enemy, and that made Homa dodge, because it also, in addition to decreasing the defense, it also inflicts blind on enemies as well. So by doing that, I was able to dodge that attack a turn earlier, and then I was just able to focus on these one by one. So after this, I'll show you 9.5, but 9.5, I had the barrel, and the barrel did a lot of damage anyway, so I actually found this one harder. I failed this one the first time, but 9.5 I did it on my very first try. But yeah, Homa is really fun. I mean, if you have Auguste to pair with her, she does quite a bit of damage. Okay, and then 9-5. Not only does she do a lot of damage, but she enables Auguste to do even more damage. So that's really nice. Okay, and so 9-5, as I said, there's this barrel here that I was able to take advantage of to attack a lot of enemies. So here I used the old scroll again, and the reason I used that was because this guy, oh, it's not my turn, but you see the bearded guy, with the white beard, that guy has higher speed than Auguste right now. So I wanted the barrel to go and attack him, because otherwise he's going to zoom out of the range of the barrel. So that's the reason why I used the old scroll, to have Auguste go before he does and damage everything with the barrel, and then use Auguste's AoE attack to take them out. So here we go, we can see. And then Auguste does a lot of damage when the damage isn't decreased by 60%, which you already knew, right? So yeah, I mean, after that I'm just using barrel attack to decrease their defense, and then Auguste just kills them. And also one of the effect for the stage, I wonder if I can see it. I can. Okay, the effect for the stage increases their range attack by 2 tiles for all characters. That's the reason why my Homa has like really long range attacks, but usually it's not that long. So I thought I would mention that as well. So here I'm using the invulnerability skill again, and taking all their damage. And then, you know, using barrel attack, decreasing their defense, and then I think Auguste was able to defeat this mini boss in the next turn with the damage output that Auguste can do. Yeah, 9,000 with that attack. 9,000 crit. Yep. Yeah, I really like the. Oh, and there you go. That's the healing, so which was increased because of the tarot that I'm using. I really like not just the increased attack from hovering support, but also the extra movement, because that really helps Auguste to get into place. Sometimes with the skills, like, you know, with his 3, this one, with like the 3 stages of the skill, sometimes it's hard to get it into the perfect position you want, but with the extra movement, it's a lot easier. So I feel like that's really key. And on top of that, don't forget that it also increases attack by 20% as well, because that skill gives him an extra attack of 20% and then also adds the bird. So overall, you're just able to get a lot more out of Auguste with that skill, not just having an extra bird to attack, but increases his whole effectiveness. So anyway, I thought, you know, in addition to showing you the build that I'm using, I thought I would show you 9-4 and 9-5 to kind of see both of them in action. So that's it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care now.